1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, there once was a union maid. She never was afraid of the goons and the geeks and the company pigs and the deputy sheriffs and maids. She went to the union hall where meeting it was called. And when the boys would come to her, oh, this is what she'd say. Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. Till the day I die. Everybody.
Okay, Sparrow.
Hello, any better for me?
A bit better. Maybe if you turn your video off and you just speak.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea. Welcome everybody to our first Friday. I'd like to thank our education committee for putting on together another great event. We put together so much programming in this last year. I think we've really outdone ourselves, and we're not stopping anytime soon. So I'd like to thank everybody for that. Before we start, we can't start without talking about the recent events, the loss of our leader, Richard Trumka. We stand with the AFL-CIO friends and family to mourn the loss of a great warrior for the labor movement, a lion of a leader that devoted his life towards fighting for the rights of working people and fair trade. He represented over 56 national affiliates, 12.5 million members, and took that responsibility very seriously without pause or hesitation. He wasn't afraid to take on tough issues or fight the status quo in his own union, in the United Mine Workers of America, or at the helm of the AFL-CIO as our president. Where lesser leaders might have stayed silent or dodged tough issues, choosing the politics of safety rather than real leadership, he discussed issues like race, class, corporate greed, and took on our allies when they catered to Wall Street over Main Street. And I'm talking about the political parties there. He will be remembered as a powerful orator, a plain, straight speaking leader, and someone who lived up to the true meaning of solidarity. Also, tomorrow marks the 76th anniversary of the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Japan. Please take a moment of silence to remember our great leader and pray that nuclear warfare never occurs again. Thank you. Now, I knew Trumka as our leader, but I think Sandy and Ashwini knew him a little better, and I've asked them to say a few words.
Well, I'm going to let Ashwini go after me because I think she's probably had a deeper connection. As the director here of the Hudson Valley Area Labor Federation, for the past 2+ years, I've had the great support from the national AFL-CIO and President Trumka's leadership, especially during this very tumultuous election that we all went through, in helping to keep labor together and helping us to really stay focused on things like getting the election certified and being sure that we all kept our eye on the prize of having an elected official, a president in office, who had their door open to labor. His leadership during this pandemic was what we all needed. It was the battle cry for our frontline workers to get their needs met. And he helped many of us to create the blueprint in our communities locally. I know here in our 7-county region, we were lockstep with the message that President Trumka was delivering to us every day. Ashwini.
Thanks, Sandy. It's really hard to believe that Rich is dead. He was a force of nature. I'll never forget all the ways he showed up for the members of my union, Unite Here, over and over, strikes at hotels, cafeterias, casinos across the country. He was there with a picket sign or with a bullhorn at the drop of a hat. And I can't count the number of times that I've heard him tell the story of how hospitality workers showed up for him and for his members at the United Mine Workers during the Pittston strike of 1989. He talked about how the bosses tried to demoralize strikers by feeding lobster and steak to the scabs. And he remembered HERE, as it was then, sending a delegation of union cooks and chefs to feed the strikers 3-course meals for as long as they were needed. So he lived a politics of real worker-to-worker solidarity, across unions, across borders. And I've been doing international work for the labor movement for the last 20 years. And it's sometimes treated as being about junkets or about long meetings in Geneva. And so I loved that Rich was a true globalist who really got it. I mean, he really believed in holding US capital accountable for injustice to workers and unions everywhere. I mean, people have been sending around photos from over the decades, Rich in 1986 picketing Shell as part of the boycott of South Africa, or Rich in 2019 when he traveled to Brazil, where former President Lula was in jail on trumped up charges. Rich led a delegation there demanding President Lula's release. And he reminded everyone that Lula wasn't just a democratically elected leader of his country, but that he'd been the democratically elected leader of his union, the metal workers. So I don't think that Rich Trumka is going to be forgotten anytime soon. I hope that we can continue to work in his legacy.
Thank you. Donna?
Okay, thank you, Sparrow and Sandy and Ashwini, and we will try to live up to that legacy. This evening is our first Friday for August. As those of you who have attended before know, we are putting on these panel discussions as part of our education effort at the Hudson Valley Area Labor Federation. Normally, we do a panel discussion with various members of the labor movement, both leaders and rank and filers, and then also community organization folks. This time, we're reporting on something else that the Education Committee did. We did a series of workshops in conjunction with Labor Notes in July. We had 3 weeks of workshops and homework where we put together the whole concept of member organizing, member power, and union democracy. So our panelists this evening are those who attended those workshops from within our own ranks. And they will discuss the various topics that we discussed in open workshops and then also in small groups with role plays. And role plays are the most difficult thing I can imagine in a group context. So our various members will speak to the issues. The overarching issue for Labor Notes and for these workshops is union democracy. And what I'm hoping comes out of these discussions is, what is union democracy? Why is it important? And how does it lead to worker power and union power? Our speakers this evening will be Cynthia Wolf from SEIU, Diana Klein from APWU, Maurice Larry from 1199, and Zoe West from UUP. So let's get started.
And Nick Moran from DSA.
So Nick, hi, how are you doing? Sorry to miss you. We will begin with Cynthia, And you're on, Cynthia.
Okay, my name is Cynthia Wolf, and I actually am from 11, excuse me, I'm actually from 1199 SEIU. I'm not from the International. And I've been in the movement, union struggle for about 33 years. And so I was asked to open up with a conversation about how do we organize the already organized. I think a lot of us struggle with our membership and the percentages of our membership that are actually participatory in whatever actions or issues we're dealing with. And as a result, it defrays from our power. It does not allow for democracy within the ranks of the membership. And it doesn't allow workers to actually get the kinds of things they need in their workplace. And so when you think about apathy, you have to think about why would workers be apathetic. You also have to think about, when you think about your membership, what kind of members are they? Right? There's this circular graph that we use, which basically talked about, 5 different kinds of members. And clearly the members that are in the bullseye are the members who are the core members, the ones who basically show up and do the work. And if I had to guess, most of our unions have very small core memberships. And so that's a problem because it doesn't allow us to be democratic. It doesn't allow us to get the message out and communicate. It doesn't allow us to pull members in to be able to be part of the process and grow the union and get the kinds of things that workers need to be able to workplaces that are fair and equitable to them. After your core group, you then have your activists. They're not the ones who always show up, but they're there more often than not. Then there's supporters who will participate, but don't really take responsibility for getting other people involved. And as we all know, the more people that are involved, the stronger we are. The stronger we are, the more power we have, and the more power we have to stop the boss from doing what we don't want him to do. Then you have the disengaged. And if I had to guess, I would say that probably 75 to 80% of our membership, or even more, are the disengaged. And those are basically workers who don't really see the union as a factor in their life, and they don't really get involved. They don't have major issues. They don't have major concerns. And generally the time you see most of your workers is around times like contract negotiations, because that's when people are most engaged in wage increases, benefits, improving their life. And so, but once the contract negotiations is over, then people go back into the woodworks. And then you have workers who are clearly hostile to the union. So then the question is, how do we move people from different levels to a higher level so that we can engage more workers in participation? I guess the question we really need to ask ourselves is, why don't workers get involved, right? And if we can understand why workers don't get involved, then we can think about, how do we engage them? How do we bring them into the meetings? How do we make our unions more democratic? And I bet all of you could probably think about the kinds of things that the bosses do to divide us, right? Some workers are just fearful for a variety of different reasons.
Okay,
And
Cynthia, I'm thinking at this point, maybe we could open it up a little bit more for
okay,
discussion, because that beautiful picture you painted of the kind of 5 different levels that's in that bullseye diagram that they love to use. I'd just like to give a shout out before we get any further also to Labor Notes, and especially Barbara Madeloni, who was really brilliant in facilitating all of our workshops. And these principles, these ideas that we covered were all things that come from a labor notes book called Secrets of a Successful Organizer. And yeah, Michelangelo is saying in the chat, Barbara was amazing. I've never seen anybody so great at facilitating meetings. In any event, so this apathy question, and one of the things that struck me in our discussion as a group about some of these ideas was how very different the environments are in each of our respective unions. So Cynthia, I remember you were telling us lots about 1199 as a very organizing oriented union, whereas some of us are from other unions that haven't really emphasized so much the organizing conversation and really engaging the membership in kind of more active ways. So I'm wondering if I'd open up to any of the participants if you want to talk about you know, what it was that you know, struck you out of what we covered in the workshops, and ways of approaching people and how that should work, and you know, what should we as organizers be doing when we're out there trying to get our members engaged. Anybody want to volunteer to that?
I'll go. As organizers, I mean, 1199 teaches us to, they teach us a lot to listen, have one-to-one conversations, always start with your story. Where you started out as, how you got where you are, your experiences, and things like that. So I find that easy to approach a member, because all members don't have the same issues, you know. Sometimes members, we have different issues. Some members have workshop issues, some members have home issues, some members have community issues. So it's always good to let your member know that you can relate to some of those issues by telling your story. That's always a good way to open a conversation and get the conversation moving.
And then once we get the conversation moving, Barbara mentioned this, I mean, a lot of people probably heard of it, but maybe not everybody watching this after the fact. The 80-20 rule. Anybody, Nick, what was the 80-20 rule?
You listen 80% of the time and speak 20% of the time. Right.
So as Maurice was saying, you can open with, you know, who you are. So the person knows where you're coming from and who you are a bit. But then after that, really focus on listening to the member that you're talking to. Any other thoughts? You know, I mean, I thought we had some great discussion in the session about what that listening means. I remember Cynthia, you were in the fishbowl with Rob Pinto doing an organizing conversation in that first session, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of interesting. I mean, what were the things that came out in that discussion afterward about how do you feel when somebody's actually genuinely listening to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, if somebody's genuinely listening to you, then you feel like you're being heard, and you're feeling like somebody's taking an interest in what your issue is, and that you're not just being shoved off. Right? The other thing is reflecting back, right? Because you want to make sure that when you're listening, you're actually hearing what the worker is saying to you. So a common thing that organizers use is, if I understand you, or am I hearing you in that this is what you're saying to me? Again, it makes the worker feel like they're being heard. You know, I think a lot of us as organizers have a tendency to think that we have all the answers and that we know everything and that we should just direct people about what they need to do. That's a real turnoff. And you're never going to get workers to be involved and engaged if you don't listen to their ideas, you don't hear it from their perspective, because your perspective and their perspective, as Maurice said, are very different. You have to understand the perspective of the worker, you know, and you have to hear what they care about. And you use that to engage them. I know one of the things when I was an organizer in the Stone Age, I used to organize little CBOs. So I had little memberships. I had 60 different little memberships, but I had 60 memberships. And the way that I was able to engage them was I learned about them and I knew what was important to them. I knew if they had children, I knew if they had elderly, I knew if they had healthcare issues, and you engage them through the issues that matter to them.
Yep. And that one piece of that, that business about feeling like somebody's heard you, someone's really genuinely listening, that would seem to be the real antidote to this whole issue of apathy. I think a lot of our members tend to feel very apathetic because they actually don't feel like anybody cares or listens to them. So building these human relationships, I mean, one of the fundamental insights coming from the labor notes people is the absolute importance of starting with the members and building your way up as the way to build power within our unions. Diana, I remember you mentioned in one of the workshops that you had some issues because so many of your the people the postal workers are representing, they're all spread out in little different post offices all over the place.
Yeah, there are 146 offices and we have about 320 people. So it's hard to get them to be cohesive and to be caring even about what somebody's doing down the road. They just get focused on their own little office and they have nobody to bounce anything off. So it's really hard to get them engaged and to get them involved in anything.
Yeah. Did you start developing any ideas out of the workshops about maybe some ways to try and bridge that separation?
Yeah, well, with the Zoom, we could bring in, like say a 20-mile radius, all the offices within 20 miles and put the invite on Zoom and have people on Zoom together rather than having to actually come, because we're so spread out. People don't want to travel 60 miles. And that we're thinking that would at least get people in the same area that have the same issues. And then if we could get those by groups, get them more involved, then maybe we can get them involved in a bigger picture down the road, but start with little pieces. So we're going to start doing some small Zoom meetings and see how that goes.
Right. Okay, that's fabulous. And, and again, about having those organizing conversations as the fundamental working unit of what
right,
organizing is. Because
people don't not come to meetings because they don't care. It's just that they've got other things in their life, so they are happy to know that you care enough to, okay, you don't have to come to this meeting, but we can do this, because they do want to be heard. They do want to hear what's going on. It's just too difficult,
right,
when it's that spread out of an area.
And again, this is a class, like each of our bargaining units, each of our sets of our unions, we're in different industries, in different endeavors. So, you pay attention to the specifics of what
right.
it is that your people need, right? Okay. And, part of the apathy question too that I want to touch on, we have another panelist who's going to join us a little bit late, who's also from UUP, who would probably be able very much to speak to this as well. But one of the things, Cynthia was mentioning that people don't like just being spoken to, like here, I've got the information and I'm going to lay it on you and then you're done, right? It's about this kind of really tuning in and listening. And one of the points that Barbara made was that organizers need to be genuinely curious about other people. And, and you need to stay present in that 80-20 conversation and not just going to check out, right? But be genuinely interested in that member, that, whoever it is that you're dealing with. But, if all your union does is, some unions are very hierarchical and very top down. And that would be the thing that people refer to more frequently as service model unions, where, we've negotiated the contract and now the job of the union is basically just to, file grievances and enforce the contract. without a whole lot of, without an emphasis on this bottom up kind of organizing model that's predicated on these conversations. And if somebody's just been speaking to you for a long time, that's one of those things that I think inspires a lot of apathy at times among members, because if they feel like there's no place for them to plug in, that nobody's really listening to them, that's a thing that will absolutely generate apathy. Okay, well, I want to move on to, so the second week of the workshops, we focused on identifying leaders and building teams. And this got into some of the area of union democracy that Donna brought up a little bit before. And I was wondering, actually, Maurice, if you wanted to speak a little bit to your experience with that, and then we can get into what we were doing in the some of the discussion of what went on in the workshop.
Speaking up to building leaders or identifying leaders, a lot of our leaders in our shops, we identify leaders by democratically voting in delegates. That's one of the ways we do it. Another way we do it is we bring our members out and have them work with the staff as staff, you know, and on campaigns, on budget fights. We help them organize rallies, community events, things like that. So that's how we try to identify our members. We're really into member engagement, member involvement. We focus on our members. Our members are our most important aspect of our union, and we try to empower them as much as we can. We use many techniques like the snowflake technique, where it's like you get a member, and that member will go to their shop and they'll get someone else to help them out to do certain aspects or issues of the union. And then that person will try to branch off and get some more members so we can bring them all together and work for one common goal, you know, depending on what we're fighting for, or, you know, what the issues are at that time. That's how I became an organizer. I came out as a member political organizer. I went around, I did campaigns. I worked on a budget fight. I've worked on 2 budget fights, actually. And I've also worked on the America for All campaign with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And honestly, when I came out, I didn't really think I was a leader, but the techniques and the training that I got from my union that empowered me to actually come out and do this type of work led to where I am right now. So I am always grateful for 1199 for taking me to another, elevating me, should I say, elevate me to another aspect of my life, which I didn't think I really had, but actually I'm showing I have it, you know? So right. Leadership is, I mean, teaching your members how to be leaders, giving them good guidance, always listening to them, you know, because they have, sometimes their ideas are, you know, top notch, you know, and you can't ignore that. You have to always give your members that chance to voice their opinions.
Yeah.
So that's how
and you know, Beth, sometimes the leaders that we think are leaders are not necessarily the leaders. I remember very distinctly in the groups that we were in, there was one particular situation where there was a woman who used to organize all the parties and the baby showers, and she had all the names and she knew how to contact people. Well, she may not have stepped up to be a delegate, but if I was looking for a leader, she'd be a leader I'd be looking to, because she clearly has the relationships with her coworkers. She's somebody that people go to and look to for guidance and support. So, you know, you have to look in a lot of different places for leadership. It's not always the people who you think are the leaders who are the true leaders in the departments or the shifts, or as it even relates to particular issues. You can have different leaders for different issues, depending upon what the issue is and how badly or how deeply they feel about it. So you have to look everywhere.
And everybody who thinks they're a leader,
crannies for all kind of reasons for leaders.
Yeah. So
everybody who thinks they're a leader is not actually a leader. They think they can do it, and you know, they wind up saying, "Oh my God, this is too hard. I can't actually do this." You know. So I mean,
Yeah, if I could just reframe this so everybody, catch everybody up to speed. So this was on the second night, one of the exercises that we did in breakout groups that Cynthia is referring to was about identifying leaders. There was they gave you a list of 5 different people, different members, and with some of their background, how long they worked there, how they engage with other people, and so on and so forth, what their attitudes about the union are. And we were asked as a group to kind of, rank them and figure out who would be the ones we would invite to be involved as part of the leadership team. And who would we just absolutely want to stay away from. And one of the points of this exercise was, as I think, Maurice, you find out there's a lot of people who are, self-promoting leaders. Barbara made the great point that leaders are basically people who have followers. It doesn't necessarily have to be within the union at the moment, right? If there's somebody in a department or in a particular office or something, if that's the person that people feel comfortable with and they go to when they have an issue, even if they're not a steward or a delegate, that's what Jane McAlevey has called an organic leader. And these are people that we really need to talk to and engage and get them involved in, and that what Cynthia was referring to earlier about stepping people up from one level to the next in that bullseye. So you get them pulled in, not just people who have the kind of energy to be very activist about lots of things in their lives will tend to gravitate to be members of your union or your community group or whatever, and it's great to have those folks. But we also need to be cultivating these other leaders who maybe don't even see themselves as leaders yet. As Cynthia was saying, the person who organizes all the birthday parties, and they have all this information. I mean, they have connections with lots of people in their unit already, and they can be incredibly valuable as you were doing that. Donna, yeah. Oh, did you have your hand up, or no? I'm seeing something else. Okay, what are the comments anybody has? Feel free to jump in. Yeah, go ahead, Donna.
I'm interested in hearing from the one person on our panel who's not representing a union, but is representing a party. And how does what we're discussing, the listening, the leadership, the democracy, how does all that apply to other organizations like community organizations and political parties? What's the difference and what's the similarity with the union?
So yeah, I'm with the Mid-Hudson Valley DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, the largest socialist organization in the United States. And we are not officially a party. We're an organization, a member-led, member-funded organization. 501c4, like other organizing outfits in the Hudson Valley. Yeah, we do have the same problem as was discussed earlier. I think Cynthia brought up, like a very small amount of our members are actually engaged. And it's really, we have no paid staff. I mean, National does, but we have no paid staff. If the members don't do it, nothing gets done. So, so that's, and with people having competing job responsibilities, and childcare responsibilities, elder care responsibilities, having these conversations is key, because people's lives do change, and getting to know each of your members and what they could help out with tasks that's fairly easy that you can do at night, but that's really useful for the organization to kind of disseminate information. So it's all, I think it's all pretty similar. I mean, our members are organization, just like in a labor union. We're labor unionists by default. And we go a step further, but that's towards the democratic rank and file unionism, where we want to not only create leaders, but we want to also change people's perspectives on these social relations. Because I think there was a quote by Dr. Richard Wolff, the economics professor, that a CEO is just another name for a king. And, you know, when people have that kind of power over your lives at your workplace, I mean, production will happen. And we know we can organize production democratically, members of the union or with the co-op. But, you know, getting people to understand and asking them to be a part of, you know, the decision making. And in order to do that, of course, because of our lots of our cultural, United States especially, our cultural upbringing with, you know, your workplace is a tyranny. You're not used to people asking for you, asking your opinion about things. It's this client, you know, this consumerist model, like manager, what I call the manager model. It's like, you know, but asking people to participate and letting them know that they have the power and making it very clear. And that's what I learned from also another, you know, I do some organizing in some classes with Community Voices Heard, which is a community organizing model. And that's, they kind of have the very pointed questions after, you know, figuring out what people care about, being like, so do you really care about this? Are you willing to do something about it? Or are you just say that you care about it? So putting you on the spot like that, which can get a little uncomfortable. And so, but those things, you know, gotta get those conversations. There's no like, you know, shortcuts to getting to know your members and what they care about. That you can choose the small things and maybe make, you know, build some trust and solidarity.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Nick. I'd like to open this question up to Zoe, who joined us a bit late. So Zoe from UUP. How you doing, Zoe?
I'm good. My apologies for being late. My last meeting ran over. Sorry. So what, can you just fill me in on the question?
So we're discussing at the moment things that came up in the second week of the workshops, which was about identifying leaders and building your team. And we talked a little bit about that, the exercise that we had about ranking different people in a particular workplace. Are you finding anything out of this that's helpful to you in the organizing work that you're doing? Maybe you want to describe a little bit what you're doing in UUP also.
Yeah, sure. So I'm at Empire State College at the Harry Van Arsdale Labor Studies School. And I had described in the training that one of the challenges that we face, our institute is a little bit separate from the rest of the college. And one of the challenges is that it's majority adjunct on faculty. And so you have a situation where the majority of people have other jobs. And at the same time, they're at a labor studies institute, so they do care about labor. So we have high membership, I think almost everyone is a member. It hasn't been an issue to get people to join, but it's been more of a challenge to overcome a few things. Like, I think one issue that we talked about in the workshop is that a lot of folks felt sort of disconnected from the union and felt like they were just a little like they'd been abandoned, because adjuncts have been less represented within the union, and sort of feeling that there wasn't really anything they could do about it. So they were disengaged. And so that was one issue. And then another issue being that we have contract negotiations coming up, and I asked the group, like, what does it look like to hook people into what's a statewide campaign, which it can be hard to make like part-timers feel invested enough to sort of think about something that's a whole big like abstract statewide campaign. And so we were thinking about what does it look like to break it down so that you have ways that people can actually, like concrete ways that people can hook into the organizing and actually see it having an impact and see it being part of a collective effort. And I'll say for my part that what I found really interesting and helpful also about the workshops is I spend a lot of time like also doing research and writing about labor organizing. And so what was actually a helpful thing was to be pushed to take all these sort of frameworks that I know, and I actually I give trainings to people on some of these similar ideas, but to be pushed to say, okay, like sit down and apply this to your situation, because I find that sometimes it's easy to, when you feel a little stuck, to be less rigorous in applying the things you know to, or the things that you've learned somewhere along the route, to your own situation. And so, you know, I think I've been kind of introduced to a lot of different organizing models. Like my first introduction to labor organizing was through an IWW model of one-on-ones and organizing. But yeah, so I found the workshop was really helpful in sort of giving a structured way to push us to really think through our situations that we're dealing with right now, and to have a group of people who are invested in brainstorming and troubleshooting and thinking through concretely what does that look like. And the other thing I'll just add before turning over the mic is that another thing that I think was a really important reminder is that as the rep for my institute, I think it's easy to sometimes fall into, because people are legitimately actually really busy with other work and have less time to give to this, and myself included, right? I have 3 other jobs, that it's easy for me to think like, oh, well, I guess I'll just take the lead and just keep doing this, and to lean less on other people. And, you know, and not to say there are a few other people at my site who have different roles, like the person who is the contingent organizer, and who really carry a lot of weight. But as far as, you know, having regular meetings and getting people engaged, it's easy for me to kind of fall into feeling like I just have to carry it forward on my own, and to forget about the sort of core organizing principle of like organizing people into those roles. And I think the workshop was a super important reminder to put myself back into that way of thinking.
Right. And, you know, I'm feeling tremendous identification with like everything you were just saying, Zoe. Myself, as, you know, the chapter president of UUP at New Paltz, at SUNY New Paltz, you know, there are days when all this stuff comes flying at you, and it's just, I'll just deal with that, as opposed to open that circle up, invite people in. This is one of the key elements, I think, from the labor notes approach too, is understanding that you need to always be developing new leadership. I mean, way too many of our organizations tend to get a little stagnant. You know, people maintain, you know, certain positions for years and years and years on end, and they get burned out, but they still kind of keep plugging along with it. So the idea of, you know, always kind of having your eye on the horizon and looking for new energy and new people. As Cynthia mentioned, you know, sort of at the top of this section, not always people that you're going to expect, right? No, it's not the one who's, you know, got a full outfit of the union gear and they're the loudest one in the room, but it could be somebody who's kind of quiet, but who everybody else in the unit really talks to or trusts in various ways. And if we can kind of get them on board with engaging more with the union, we're going to have that many more people, right? As we bring people along. Maurice, I see you nodding your head pretty strongly.
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of goes back to what I said before. I mean, empowering your members, you know, giving them the education to move on and empower the next member, and that member can empower that member, you know, and it actually works. It works for us. You know, we have had some success with it. Like I said, we have certain programs. We have the MPO program that we bring members out, you know, and we teach them how to be leaders, how to go, and then they go back to their shops and they carry that leadership that we have taught them back to their shops. And then their shops say, wow, how'd you get so knowledgeable? Well, I went out and I did this. You know, the union asked me to do this, or I went to this rally, or I did this campaign. You know, so I mean, it all rolls back to, you know, empowering. If you empower one, they can empower the next. That next one can empower the next one. You know, so like Snowflake, You know, you just keep building it out, keep building it out. You're in the center and you just keep building it out. And that next person keeps building out. You know, it's not an easy task. I'm not saying it's easy, you know. You're going to get your, like you said, you're going to get your naysayers. No, I don't want to do this. I don't have the time. I don't do that. But you keep moving on. You keep pushing forward. You know, you just keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing, you know. And for the, like, we having issues right now. Like a lot of my older, like more seasoned members, they are having a time getting the younger, you know, generation to come on board. You know, that's a big issue with our shops right now, the younger generation coming on board. So I have a good rapport with people in shops, you know. I have a good rapport with younger people because I really think I'm a kid at heart, you know. So if I can pick that one, if I can get that one member, younger member that I can motivate to motivate another member, and that member can motivate the other one, I think I'm doing it. I think it'll help, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, Beth, we also have a hierarchy of roles in 1199. So you don't have to go from member to delegate. You can start out as a shift leader, or you can start out as a contract leader, or you can start out as somebody who's willing to pass out flyers or pass out, right? And so what happens is you go to the member where they're at and at the level of skill that they're comfortable with. And then based on their getting some success in those smaller roles, then you're able to move them into taking on more of a role in the union. And that's a way that we grow leaders and delegates. And then eventually, like Maurice, 1199 staff members, right, to come on board. You start small, you start where they're at, you give them some success in what they're doing, and then they willingly will take on more of a role and build themselves up to other kinds of leadership positions.
Okay, I think this is a good point. We'll shift into the third week of the summer school, which was focusing on turning issues into campaigns, although part of that night turned into, I almost wanted to call it a group therapy session, focused around some of these issues of union democracy. And it really turns on this fundamental notion that Barbara was really trying to kind of get across to us. This idea of the power resides, and touching on what Maurice was just saying, making the members feel empowered because they have the power, and recognizing that and opening up channels for that rank and file power to translate into leverage, real leverage on real issues that we have in the workplace. But that's not going to be a spontaneous process. That's why we're organizers. It's because we need to, have the relationship with the members, however that's organized in your union. And Cynthia, you just gave us another beautiful demonstration of one way that goes on, and that's really effective for the kind of workplaces that you're organizing. We all need to be keeping in mind, again, how to tune our organizing model to the people that we've got to organize. Whatever the specific challenges are, how that work is organized, and so on. Anyway, so in terms of turning all that member feedback, we're listening to you, it becomes apparent that we have some real issues. So what are we going to do with those issues? And it's presented in the workshop as you have an issue, and to really press it, you need to develop a campaign. Right. At this point, I'll throw to Diana to see what your thoughts were on developing issues into campaigns and out of the workshops, and any insights you got from that.
Okay, I'm Diana Klein, and I'm a member of the APWU, which is the American Postal Workers Union, and I'm president of the Mid-Hudson area local that runs out of Newburgh, New York, and we do have a plant there. So initially, when we started talking about this, Rob Pinto gave a great idea, a great analogy when the Verizon workers went on strike. Up to that point, it was hard to get people to be cohesive and be sharing the same ideas, and their strike was like got a lot of press, and they were actually successful with that strike. So then the union was great. Everything was good. On a personal level, with the American Postal Workers Union, last year when it was time for the ballots to go out for the presidential race, and all the states were talking about mailing them in, and then Trump appoints DeJoy to be the Postmaster General, and the first thing he does is gets rid of the sorting machines to slow down the mail. Well, that became a national campaign, a national issue, so that our work as local leaders was so much easier because the press was calling us, the politicians were calling us. We were holding rallies every week. We were doing a rally, and we would get people to come to every one of them, different set of people. So it just made it so much easier to do that because you had an issue that involved a lot of people, and you got a lot of outside influences that you would otherwise have to do all yourself. So it just made it for a much easier campaign to do. And then we were successful. The public was mortified, and when we got a lot of support from the public. So it was a good feeling for everybody that our issue became everybody else's issue, and it was very personalized. And so fast forward to now, DeJoy again wants to shut down 18 plants across the country, including our Mid-Hudson plant. So last night we were on a Zoom with all the other 18 facilities, and we had a panel from the national APWU, and they said, what do you need? We said, we need a national campaign. We need national to put it out there as a national issue so that we'll get that same kind of cooperation and support that we got last summer, that we don't have to do all the legwork ourselves again, because everybody's tired. I mean, it just makes it so much easier to have an issue and to develop that campaign over that issue. And then you do get, if it's successful, people get more interested. They don't think it was for naught, or, oh, it doesn't matter anymore. No, they saw that it does matter. So it just makes it easier for the people doing the organizing and for the people involved. And it's a good way to get more people in your union involved.
Okay, thanks, Diana. Some of what you were saying resonates a lot with a comment that I wrote down in my notes from Barbara Madeloni's discussion of how to pick a good issue to organize around. She said it needs to be widely felt, so lots of people need to kind of feel affected by it. Deeply felt, something that's important to people, and something that's winnable. Right. And I think that's, that the kind of example you gave about the stuff that was going on with getting rid of the sorting machines and so on in advance of the election demonstrates all of those things. I mean, right. Lots of people thought it was important. It's really important that ballots get in on time. And so that's deeply felt by a lot of people, and ultimately was something that, something could be done about it that could be winnable.
Right.
So,
absolutely.
Yep. So, so those are great principles. Now, not all of us have issues that are going to be of immediate national importance. I don't know, Zoe, I'm thinking about, hey, what's going on with adjuncts at public higher education universities who are being, and again, part of the issue is people aren't aware of this issue. That, that adjuncts are being paid around maybe $3,000 for a 3-credit course for an entire semester to teach a whole class of students, over 15 weeks. And grade all of their stuff, and I mean, these are to have a job as an adjunct, you need to have an advanced degree, at least a master's. A lot of people have PhDs, and are toting around. A lot of the younger folks in this kind of work have major student loan debt, and it's a massive challenge. You don't always get health insurance with these one-off gigs. There's no job security. So if we wanted to start talking about building a campaign, Zoe, do you have thoughts about what that might look like, or feedback that you got from the workshop?
Yeah, I think you raise really important points. One of the things I've noticed is if I talk to students about this, because since I teach in labor studies, this is legitimately a topic of discussion about it. I frame it as this is what's happening in a lot of industries, and academia is acting like these other industries, right? That it's moving towards temporary work, moving towards classifying employees differently so you don't have to provide benefits, so you can pay them less, et cetera, et cetera. And I find it's always really eye-opening for students because they think of academia as this sort of like separate haven from industry, from corporate America, et cetera. And a lot of my students are union members in the building trades. But it's, so just thinking about frames for, it actually feels like it should be relatively, I'm not gonna say easy, but it shouldn't be so hard to give the right frames for why adjunct issues are deteriorating higher ed, public higher ed across the country, and that this is actually like what is being done in all these industries that we see it's deteriorating people's ability to have like dignity at work. It's the same thing happening, right? And it's happening to a public good, public higher education. And so like narrowing down to New York State and SUNY, I think there's a way that going harder with that framing is really critical in making it more of a public issue. Because I think part of what has been missing is, and we saw this, like CUNY had more of a visible public campaign about adjunct pay, and made it this much more like public facing campaign. And so I think what we at SUNY for UUP that we want to, and you know, I'm talking about adjunct issues, but obviously this is also applies to issues that are not just adjunct issues, the issues that other staff and faculty face that are just, in general, I think higher ed, public higher ed issues should be pushed to the front as this is something that is like our public good and that this impacts everyone. And that means also that students should see it as their issue as well, which also means that we need to think about it from the perspective of students. And so these are all, I guess, more abstract framing thoughts, but that I think there have been a lot of lost opportunities to really dig into that and like the way that academia really acts like corporations in the way that they are diminishing and deteriorating everyone's jobs, and that when they come for adjuncts, they're coming for everyone. That's deteriorating everyone's work. And so that as far as the large framing, but what I brought to the workshop was also just thinking more concretely about, okay, if we have statewide negotiations coming up, how do we make this more of an issue internally, organize within our union to push for that to be possible, to have that more external stance. And so, you know, folks were helping like brainstorm just different ideas about even just kinds of actions you could do at a campus level or coordinating across campuses that highlight, you know, for example, I know some people brought up like highlight the wages that are owed to adjuncts if they were paid parity, or the student debt that is carried by faculty and adjuncts, you know, and kind of brainstorming different ideas for how do you take these sort of large abstract things and turn them into concrete actions that tap into the issues that folks want to be like front and center in the upcoming contract negotiations.
Right. Yeah, Donna.
I see two kind of avenues that relate to this. Number one, it amazes me that K-12 teachers, in addition to university teachers, are unionized in New York State, and yet the labor movement is not part of the curriculum in K-12. If people talk about unions, they do it on their own, but it's not a requirement that students in all elementary and secondary levels learn about unions and learn that their own teachers are union members. That's one. The second thing is I'm always amazed to hear from members of non-education unions that the adjuncts are underpaid. They're shocked at this because the stereotype of educators is that they live in an ivory tower, they make lots of money, they have all this education, they don't have to worry. So we have really two jobs. We have to educate students from the time they're little children about unions, because we're all union members. And secondly, we have to educate our co-unionists in other industries that education workers are workers and they're underpaid and they're exploited and their unions need support. And for up until Janus, of course, everyone was automatically a member, and now they're not. But that, I don't think, is as big an issue as the consciousness of the rest of the labor movement, including education union members, that this is a huge deal. It's super important, and we need the support. And a graphic example of this is the connection between full-time tenured faculty, which the outside world thinks all college teachers are full-time and tenured and they have pensions and all this stuff. So between that population and the adjuncts, and there's not always solidarity, and that's one of our big jobs.
So in the workshop, we had our breakout session was focusing on this question of building a campaign and thinking about what would be for, whatever, we have problem X. And so each person in each breakout group, we kind of picked up on whatever an issue in the workplace one of the people in the group had. And then thinking of different ways to respond to it, but thinking in terms of an escalation. So you start from something that's a relatively small ask, something that's relatively easy to do, that that starts developing visibility or whatever around your issue, and then how could that escalate, right? And within the union movement, the sort of like level 11 escalation is a strike, for instance. That's but you don't start out saying I'm going to go on strike. You start out with these kind of step-by-step things to build the pressure and build the solidarity around the issue among your members. So I don't know if any of you had interesting things to report out of your breakout groups from that third session, talking about, like, we had that Jamboard exercise where we were figuring out different tactics and how they would build. Did anybody have any interesting experiences there?
Yeah, so when we were talking about what was going on in New York City as it relates to the mandate to be vaccinated. The healthcare workers were the heroes for the past year and a half with other frontline essential workers. And now they're telling the workers who put themselves at risk every day and their families at risk every day, either get vaccinated or you don't have a job. And so that really takes away self-determination and people's ability to make decisions for their own body. And so the way that whole thing started was you would have conversations in your institutions, and then you would do something which was innocuous, that people would not have a hard time doing and putting themselves out there. So you start with a sticker, or you start, right? So I think our sticker was, and Maurice, you can help me if I don't do this right. It was vaccinate yes, mandate no, right? So we wanted people to be vaccinated because as healthcare workers, we know that the most appropriate thing to do that will stop the pandemic, but to mandate it, you don't have the right to control my body. And we did.
The other slogan, I'm sorry, Cynthia, I don't mean to cut you off, but the other slogan too was educate, not mandate. That's the other part that we were also chanting as well. Another part we focused on, educate instead of mandate, and what Cynthia had said before.
Right. So this sticker campaign. So that's a great example of like one of these kind of low level.
Right. Or a petition.
or a petition, something like that, where you're getting people engaged. I mean, the idea of a sticker campaign is you get everybody on the floor, everybody in, on campus or wherever your situation is, as many people as possible wearing the sticker. So that adds, it adds a level of visibility to the issue. And a petition, I mean, that's a similar sort of operation where you're trying to get as
Right.
many people to sign on.
And then you walk the petition in, which means you've now got people putting themselves on the line to walk the petitions into management. And then the third part of this campaign was they did a rally. And so they took it to the streets and they took it to the public and they did public education. It seems like everybody's digging their heels in, including Governor Cuomo, who's now going to mandate public healthcare workers and people who do public facing things to also get mandated. So this fight's not over. And the question is, how do you then escalate it to the next level? But you start out small, you start out with something that isn't too hard for people to do when they're not going to feel they're putting themselves out there that much. And then you move it up the ladder. So it's stickers, petitions, walk-ins, rallies. Unfortunately, we can't strike until September 30th when our contract expires, but then that's when the proverbial stuff is going to hit the fans.
Right. And I envy 1199 that ability to strike, because as a, public New York State public worker, I do not have that. I mean,
Right.
well, technically it's illegal, but that's the other thing. One of the really interesting comments that Barbara made, I think maybe even the first night, was it doesn't have to be in the contract for you to make it happen, right? You don't have to have the legalese in the contract. If there's an issue that's something important, you can organize to win it, to bring pressure on the employer to do what you need them to do. And for instance, I mean, currently we're undergoing a lot of discussion about things about they want to have all the students back on campus in the fall semester, and there's all these concerns with COVID and the new Delta variant, and will we and how our administration is approaching all of that stuff. I mean, the employer has their own issues and their own, kind of hierarchy of concerns, which for the most part, very definitely are not exactly the same as the ones that we and our members have. So, if you're worried about the bottom line and getting tuition dollars in the door, maybe you're not so concerned about health and safety of all the workers being, if invoking some of these measures is going to be something that is going to discourage students. And in fact, well, I'm not going to get into, I just read a thing this afternoon from some emails that involved the president of Columbia University, who made reference to the fact that so many of their faculty are contingent, so they maybe wouldn't have to worry so much and they could make people teach in person since they're contingent, which, I mean, this is how the boss wins things. They bring that kind of pressure on folks. But in terms of sort of building a campaign, again, it's about engaging as many members as possible and then continuing to build that. But that's the leverage. That's the beauty of this kind of model of organizing, is that it's about escalating things in organizing intelligently. So you have this kind of escalation from step to step to step. And at any point, I mean, for instance, so if we kept going and we went beyond 3 and went to 4, and 4 was striking, right? You've got this whole series of efforts. It makes it apparent to the employer that this is an issue, number one, that the members care about, that is widespread enough that they should be worried about it, that ultimately you deliver the petition, you then do the outreach to the public, which is bringing them public pressure to bear, which is the example that Diana was giving us earlier, so important for the postal workers. And if they still don't want to do what we really need them to do, Cynthia, you're saying, when your contract expires, you're ready to, well, you're organizing, doing the organizing to get ready for a strike potentially. Those of us, I mean, in UUP, a number of us have been involved trying to talk about striking and developing a viable strike threat, or a credible kind of strike threat, despite the fact that the Taylor Law exists and there are penalties if we would go on strike. But the fact is that since the Taylor Law has existed, there have been public sector unions in New York that have gone on strike. And there are different ways of organizing that. I don't know, Zoe, I know you're active in MAC with me, our caucus within UUP. Did you want to comment on that a bit? That organizing, regardless of the fact that, you know, it's technically illegal or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and it's been interesting to see that become a little bit, you know, it got mentioned at a delegate assembly, and then to have a committee created to look into what would it mean to change our constitution so that we can authorize a strike. I think there's an interesting way that there's a portion within our union that I think upon hearing just the word strike thinks, like sometimes people react in a way that they don't think about the sort of organizing that happens toward a strike authorization vote before a strike even happens. And that sort of those steps. And so there's a reaction as though we're advocating that everyone should just go on strike like next month, which, you know, as most of us know, strikes are super hard, and we wouldn't be so irresponsible as to advocate a strike until the appropriate organizing has happened to get people on board. And the Taylor Law, you know, and I think it depends on the union. Because there have been unions that have gone on strike and that have faced the punishments for it, right? I'm thinking of like the TWU strike, and so there's power in it, but I think it's also really critical to be able to show that you have the capacity to do that and to be able to call a strike authorization vote, to have your union be willing to put that on the table by calling a vote, right? And then to do the internal organizing to make folks feel like this is worth it. This is worth taking this next step, right? And so I think, you know, Beth, you talked about the sort of escalation of strategies, and that's clearly relevant as far as thinking about building towards a strike in any way. But I think this question of even being able to feel like a strike authorization vote is on the table, and that this is something that we can credibly show our opposition that we have people organized in that way. Because I think in MAC, one of our caucus within UUP, one of the things we've identified is that there is that our union doesn't do enough to really actually like organize the membership for pressure, and that pressure is often coming from political pressure through like sort of lobbying and things like that, and advocacy, political advocacy. And so when we're going into contract negotiations, I don't think anyone on the other side of the table thinks of this as a union that's prepared to strike. And so what does it look like to turn this into a union where members are actually organized in that sense? And again, you know, I think it just takes us back to this question of doing that campus by campus, little pockets, and then stitching together. And I see, for me, my experience of MAC is that it's a way to connect what feel like very kind of localized fights that before I joined MAC, I felt sort of disconnected from the rest of the union statewide. You know, twice a year we have delegate assemblies, but aside from that, and so it's been really also helpful to have our caucus as a way to understand how the issues I see at my site connect statewide, and how we can actually like weave that more comprehensive organizing strategy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the best way to not have to strike is to be ready for a strike. So for example, we've been having our members sign up for the credit union, putting money away so that, and the credit union authorizations go to the bosses. So the bosses know that the workers are putting money away to be able to go on strike. The best way to not have to strike is to be ready and to show the bosses you're ready to do that. And so the credit union campaign we did, or we're continuing to do, right? The bosses know that workers are putting money away. So, right? And so we have this slogan and we say it to the bosses every time we go across the table. We don't want to strike, but we will if we have to, right? So the best way to not have to strike is to be ready to strike. And I just want to remind folks, I don't know how many people have the historical memory, but TWU, which is a public union, did go on strike. And when did they go on strike? 2 weeks before Christmas, when you needed the transit for people to go do shopping. So it hurt the merchants, it hurt people who wanted to go shopping, it hurt. And they then put their leader in jail, and they got attention because all the unions picketed the jail because the leader was in jail, because he did what was the right thing for his members to do in spite of the Taylor law. So, right? So there are ways to do this. And I think unions may have even helped to get those penalties wiped away, or maybe the international paid it for TWU. But there are ways to do this if you're ready to do it and you show the boss that you have the willingness to do it.
Yeah, I actually attended a different labor notes workshop a couple years ago. And in one of the workshops that I was in, somebody from another union shared the story that they had been, developing, organizing, they were trying, but they were getting to the point where they were on the verge of going on strike. And the management, the thing that finally broke management was when they saw that they had ordered the porta potties for the strike line. That made it real to them. And all of a sudden, okay, no, we'll like, cave to some of your demands or whatever, which I thought was a really fascinating story. We're kind of circling around the last few minutes of our discussion here. I want to circle back to some of the concerns that Donna brought up at the very beginning, where she was talking about union democracy. And one of the comments that was made in that final week of the workshop was the path to democracy is direct action. I know, Nick, I have a note here, you were involved in part of that conversation. Do you want to comment on that concept and how that relates to what we've been talking about with organizing?
You talk about democracy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, to build solidarity, you got to take a shared risk, kind of, and that's what a good leader puts their neck out, like the president of TWU was put in jail. I mean, that he probably thought about that was the risk that he was going to take if members put it on strike. So, and that's, whether it's a little thing or a big thing, like, yeah, definitely doing direct action would help increase democracy. Then you see your collective power and you share that experience. You get to see kind of where, and it kind of just demystifies, I guess what's the worst thing boss can do, and that's, and hopefully it will also show you if you've done, and I think that I was thinking about when Zoe was speaking, was like the boss tries to divide us workers from each other, and adjunct professors, there's a lot of education that needs to be done about professors are workers, and students and workers, students and professors. There's not much difference besides that professors have have gained more knowledge over the years, and they still have student debt, and it's not like the student is paying the money that goes directly to the professor. So that's, I think, so getting the community involved, and so that when you do your direct action and building that community of shared kind of collective action, shared sacrifice, it made me sacrifice. Of course, hope you're gonna win. You never know. But that can really build lots of solidarity. And I think I just wanted to point out Hudson Valley News Guild. I saw they announced that they have they were being tried to be split up into different bargaining units. And they had a lot of community support and political support, and they've just announced that they will have ballots going out on August 13th as one bargaining unit. So they had a lot of people were supporting them visibly, actively, and I think that helped.
Yep. Okay, anybody else want to have a comment on this union democracy and how I mean, it's a theory of power. It's a particular sort of theory of power that we're talking about here.
May I put my 2 beads worth in?
Yeah, let's go, Sandy.
So I just want to reflect this conversation in a different direction, working across affiliates and working with affiliates and running an organization here with leadership that's been really committed to a democratic process and being sure that our affiliates have a very clear invitation and path to participate. I feel that the leadership here has really created an environment in which we can flourish and we can kind of dream about organizing and talk about our hopes for the future and our community and how that relates to this movement that we all care about. So I just believe that that was very affirming, going through that process with labor notes and reflecting here at the Hudson Valley Area Labor Federation and seeing how our executive officers, our vice presidents, our affiliates, and these committees that are working, like the education committee, our events committee, the organizing committee that's working with the community. And I understand that we're even going to possibly expand into having a new committee that's on the horizon. So it was very affirming, the experience for me.
Okay. Any other comments from any of the panelists or anybody in the audience? You have comments or questions?
I can add just like one comment about the democracy, and I think we might have discussed this a little bit in the workshop, but I think there's an important element of it that's about that if folks don't feel what it's like to actually be in a fight, be and organize to win a small victory, then it's very hard for them to believe it's possible. And I feel that organizing is expanding people's sense of what's possible, and it requires not just telling them, but also pulling them in so that they feel it. And so I think that's one of the best arguments for union democracy, that, you know, when I see people who are disengaged and feel that it doesn't matter what they do because their issue isn't going to be addressed, it's not surprising if you haven't had an experience of being hooked into organizing. And if the things that happen are just happening sort of far away and they seem kind of abstract. And so, yeah, just as another aspect of it, I just think it's so important to feel what it's like to be in the fight. And that's what really, I think, for a lot of people sinks them deeper in.
Yeah. Okay, anybody else? Donna? I know you have a lot of thoughts on union democracy, Donna.
I agree with everything that Zoe just said. I think she made it concrete what democracy is not an abstraction. It's a way of being, and it's a way of participating, and that being passive and just looking on isn't going to do a thing for us. We really have to participate at whatever level, you know, and several people have said this, that I think Marie said it most articulately, that you start small if you have to. If you've got a lot of experience, then you use that experience. If you have no experience, then you start where you are, and it's exciting. And you and it's addictive, I have to say. You always want more. So the more people that can get involved in at whatever level, the greater your chances of success. And also the whole idea of risk, right? If you don't risk anything, you won't get anything. And if you do get in there, you have a chance. If you don't get in there, you have no chance. So we have to look at it that way. It's not all rosy, right? There are no guarantees. But if we don't do it, if we don't get in the fight, we can't possibly win what we need. And we're not in an environment right now that's pro-labor. Whatever the president of the United States says, if you look around, there are lots and lots of union members. There are lots of people who want to be in unions, but there's not a lot of examples of workers getting in the fight. And the teachers' unions have been amazing. There's some really wonderful examples. The Amazon workers were amazing, and they're going to do it again. So those are our examples. Those are our, the trendsetters. And we have to do it, and we have to take risks, not dumb risks, right? Not risks that'll just destroy the whole thing, but at whatever level, just get involved. And I think that's our job as organizers, to engage with our members where they are, have discussions, have discussions about what's possible, hear what people need, and then go do it.
I think that sounds like a kind of ringing summation of what we experience in the workshop. So thank you, Donna, for that.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of our panel members tonight for coming and sharing their thoughts and insights. And I also want to give an absolute shout out to Rob Pinto, who served as a co-facilitator in the workshops alongside Barbara Madeloni from Labor Notes, and Rob did an amazing job with it. Unfortunately, for some personal reasons, he wasn't able to join us tonight. But he's one of the good guys in the labor movement. Everything, I start loving him more. So anyway, thanks to everybody for participating in this, and to everybody, I hope that it is taking things away from the workshops, and have those organizing conversations, organize your members, and build the power.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes. So on that note, I will queue up our. Hold on. I've got some outgoing credits to share, so I'm going to share my screen now.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? But the union makes us strong.